Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, Key Skills for a Business Analysis Career in Science. I'm your host, Mariah Weiss, and I work as part of the marketing team here at IIBA. IIBA is an independent, not-for-profit professional association serving the global business analysis community. A recognized thought leader, IIBA is dedicated to elevating the discipline of business analysis. We provide our global community with relevant tools, resources, and networking opportunities to take control of your career. I'm here with your speaker today, Maureen McVey. Maureen has over 20 years of experience as a business analyst and is a founding member of IIBA. Maureen has worked in a number of sectors, including finance, insurance, law enforcement, manufacturing, not-for-profit agencies, municipal, and federal governments. She's currently working for the science section of the Canadian Federal Government Department and is part of the departmental BACC implementation. Today, Maureen will discuss with you how practicing business analysis in a science-focused industry is an untapped opportunity for many professionals, particularly concerning its appeal to business data analytics. So as part of the public sector, she brings a lot of her experiences to the table. A little bit of housekeeping before we get started. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the questions tab in your control panel. We will answer some of your questions at the end of this session as time permits. You can find today's deck in the Handouts tab. Today's webinar recording will be available in our IIBA webinar archives page within 7 business days of broadcast. Now to get us started, I'll launch a poll with one of our audiences just to get an idea about your interests in applying business analysis in a scientific context. I know you're all here, but I don't know how many of you may have engaged in that previously, or maybe you're just curious about it in the future. So we're having a little problem with this poll, unfortunately, so I won't be able to launch it at this time. Sorry about that. So I will have to continue with it just without that initial poll. So just to get us started then, I'll have Maureen launch into her presentation.
Welcome, everyone, and thanks for coming to join me today. I'm really excited about this topic. We're talk about science and requirements, but how different is it from business, really? And talk a little bit about at least my experience as a business analyst within the science context, and hopefully give you some ideas on where you can take your career. So just a little bit about me. I'm in this pandemic. I'm on a lake, so I really can't complain. And it's kind of neat because I'm working for the Department of Fisheries and Oceans. And the 2 sectors I work with are science and Coast Guard. And what I thought I'd do is just talk a little bit about my experience and in some of the areas that Moira brought up. I don't know how many of you, work in any of the industries that I've listed on the left-hand side, but we all know that a lot of the focus on areas within business, of course, have a lot to do with increasing revenue or saving money. They need to be efficient, they need to be accurate, they need to decrease errors and meet regulation. And a lot of organizations, especially publicly traded ones, are very concerned about their shareholders. And so how do we do that? Needless to say, as business analysts, we're looking at improving processes or producing apps where, the client can deposit a check now using your mobile phone. Data, data, data. I can't talk about that enough. I used to say, processes might be the backbone of an organization that provides direction on how your decisions get made through business rules. But data is certainly what I call the lifeblood of an organization. And so KPIs are critical to be defined in order to ensure that what we've automated or how the business has been improved meets those KPIs and helps us to measure what's going on, needless to say. It's often in the private sector, it's often very transactional, right? A client is interacting, or customer rather, is interacting with the business in order to get something of value. And typically, and most of the time, there's a financial uh, transaction that happens there. And of course, need customer help and self-help are areas where organizations are trying to help their customers to help themselves to solve problems or create a profile that is ultimately used for marketing, et cetera, et cetera. So these are the themes we have within business. I'm wondering if we have the poll that we could talk about. Are polls working at all, Moira?
Yep, polls are back. Sorry about that one. Actually, I
Okay,
can
no
launch the
worries.
first poll as well. Okay,
Yeah,
so
let's do that.
sounds great. So launching it right now. Do you see yourself as a professional that can work in science within a business analysis context? Do you even just see yourself interested in it or want to know more about it? I'm seeing some good results coming in. Okay, I'll close the poll in a few seconds and closing. So I'm going to go ahead and share the results. So it looks
Okay.
like we've got some good interest here. So I see that
Oh,
we've got some good, yeah. So I'll go ahead, I can go ahead and launch the second poll if you'd like as well, Maureen, or would you like to
sure.
wait? Yeah, okay. So I'm gonna go and hide this one and share our second poll. So how different do you think working in science is from the public versus private sector? So I'm seeing a lot of varied answers here. I'll just keep it open for a few more seconds.
Poll, if you can see your screen.
And I'll close that one. So I'll go ahead and share the results again.
Mm-hmm.
So 27% very different, 65% moderately different, and 8% not different at all. Maureen, I was
Oh,
wondering if
that
you
is.
could, yeah, share your thoughts.
Mhm. Yeah, well, it's interesting because when I first started with Department of Fisheries, a lot of the work that I was doing was for support departments like HR, et cetera. And then this opportunity came up with the science group in the East Coast. And I thought, oh no, I'm not going to be able to do this. I don't know anything about science. I was in arts and business when I went to university. So I thought, oh, this this has got to be very different. But at the same time, it was an exciting opportunity to be able to get introduced to something new for me. Um, in my, I'm sort of getting closer to the end of my career, and I thought it would be a great opportunity. So, so is business analysis that different? Well, it is and it isn't. As we know, we're here as BAs to help people, and so I often, as I move from different departments in the private sector, I would always have to learn new language, right? New acronyms and understand. A lot of my learning was around learning languages, their language, if you will, and understanding their technology. And the same is very, very true for scientists. Uh, they're conducting research, they're managing data, a lot of data, terabits of data, and there's an awful lot of collaboration required. Does that sound familiar? Does that sound like business analysis? And so, the requirements I've done often are with commercial off-the-shelf products, right? Our COTS solutions. And I thought, I wonder what types of COTS solutions there are in science, and how can I help them work better, easier, faster, and more efficiently? Not too much different, really, than private sector. So, I stood back and I said, well, I have to define what their problem is. I have to understand or what the opportunity could be. I need to plan, obviously, who am I going to speak with? How am I going to facilitate the elicitation activities? And I'm going to do some modeling to analyze, how things fit together and ensure that I'm defining the future state the way that the group, my stakeholders see it, and then obviously come back with some options or recommendations to help them make some, informed decisions. So when I was assigned to this project, it was the scope of it was that scientists need to collaborate more efficiently. Collaboration has been a challenge. And I thought, oh, that's a weird scope. Collaboration. So a lot of the preparation for this, I wanted to first really understand their process. And so if we look at the research process, they're really defining the problem, or in other words, what questions do we need answers? And guess what? They have to plan. And the planning is where a lot of this collaboration occurs. Sound familiar to a VA? Where they have to figure out who can we work with to get the samples that we need in order to do the research or do the analysis. Uh, what is it I need to get? What equipment do I need to do this? And then often in science, it's really, really interesting, especially in the world of water and oceans, a lot of sensors, right? A lot of specialty equipment that is needed. They even have these like mobile labs because they're out in remote areas. And so communication can be difficult, and that is where collaboration can fall down. When does it need to happen? Well, they're limited in Canada because of the weather for most scientists, not all. So they're doing a lot of their work from about April, give or take, through to November, where they're collecting their data. And they're doing not only collecting data through sensors, they're observing a lot. They're uh, taking video and audio recordings of the water and the animals that live in there, and they're gathering samples. So they're gathering live samples of fish and other water animals, and they're also gathering samples of uh, some water, etc. And then they go about analyzing it and modeling it. And they have individuals that are specialty in modeling. There's a lot of good modeling tools they use, but they're often using open source. Open source is a big thing for science because of cost. And so they're using R and so on. And then they're going to publish those results, which helps the government to make decisions, determine policy, and even legislation. So let's say that all the wonderful lobsters out in the East Coast, let's say they're in lower abundance than before, the last, say, 3 or 4 years. The government has to make some tough decisions on whether or not to shut down that fishery in order to ensure that there's uh, enough abundance in the next fishing season for the industry to continue. And so there's a lot of decisions that are made. And also there's international decisions made, which I love, is that there's a lot of publication of the data and their findings to specialty, I call them myself, specialty websites like, the International Sponge database, where scientists from around the world can go in and look at others' research. And in the Canadian federal government, we also have an open data policy that our scientists are required to publish to that uh, site within 2 years of their published research. All in all, it's a very what I should say is a web of collaboration, because the scientists not only need to collaborate with other scientists, but also utilizing in the data collection side a lot of individuals and organizations such as fishery associations to help gather that data. And they have to be very specific to protocols in order to ensure that the science is good, that the data is accurate, usable, etc. So there's a lot of interaction. And then, of course, our federal government has also put in a mandate for our scientists to work with the Indigenous communities to utilize that really valuable Indigenous knowledge that can add us an amazing, different perspective on the information that they're gathering. So if we think about business and data analytics, identify the research questions, source your data, analyze the data, interpret the results, and use them for decision making. Very, very, very similar to private industry. So what did I do? Well, I interviewed a number of scientists, and they are definitely a different, all of our stakeholders are slightly different and view a business analyst in different lights. They were fairly new to business analysis, and so they were a little like, "Why? All I want to do is my research." They're very dedicated to their research and the work that they do, and so they're a bit skeptical. And I think that's just the nature of a scientist. You want proof before you make any decisions. Um, I also interviewed a lead Indigenous coordinator to find out how collaboration with Indigenous communities is happening now, to see how the current state worked, and then led a visioning session with the lead science outreach. Now, this is really cool stuff because this particular group also uh, does outreach into the community and into schools. So there's a lot of really interesting stuff that's happening there where they might not with COVID right now, but they would bring in students from a class and they would put on um, headsets that would provide them with a view of the ocean from underneath the ocean. They would talk about what happens when you throw garbage into the ocean, what happens, and then show that transition of how the fish deplete. It's fascinating stuff. And so that's very much a part of collaboration with the community. Um, so what else did I do? I not only interviewed scientists, I also did some observation. I watched a video of whale necropsy. I did tours of various labs to see how they work currently, and one of which was really, really interesting was what's called a level 3 containment lab, where they bring in pathogens and study the effects of those pathogens in order to stay ahead of any potential invasive species that could bring in a pathogen or some other pathogen that might affect our fishing industries and our waters. So those are just a few of the things that I did. I could, I'm just checking the time, so let's see how much time we've got. Okay. So, what I want to talk a little bit about is some of the interesting um, information that I gleaned from the science activities at Department of Fisheries. That there's an awful lot of use of COT solutions to manage a regulatory environment, or not so much regulatory, but also in order to maintain ISO certifications. And so that tends to be chain of custody using laboratory information systems. So that's somewhat transactional in that a sample will come in, it has to be recorded, and each step of the analysis of that particular sample is managed through the LIMS system, as we call it, and also provides reports back out to our particular, what we call clients, which can be the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, but also evaluations of samples that come in through other government departments and our own. there's an awful lot of data sharing, and management of that data at uh, can be siloed because of the individual nature of the research that's occurring. There's not a lot of overlap, however, in the actual activity of the research. But once the data is produced, a lot of that data can be quite valuable to other scientists. So, for instance, um, information from Environment Canada on the state of a particular body of water, so let's say a river that's close to agriculture, will provide information on the watershed and how agricultural products are affecting the water, and what does that mean to the industry, whatever the fishing industry might be within that region, and what needs to be done in order to either rectify that issue and or inform communities, etc. So it's really all about the data, getting it, sharing it, managing it, and using it. Uh, Data can also focus around the samples themselves. So those samples can include the need to have them stored in specific types of a liquid. And that sample management also needs to provide information when those liquids need to be managed. Some of them can actually explode. So we need to know how to manage those effectively so that we don't have an accident. But also, we have samples from the 1800s, and that can be needs to be available in order to do trend analysis, but also uh, managed very efficiently and effectively, so that we can take advantage of that valuable information. I know that there's some things that I never thought I would ever put into a requirements document, and that would be, the words whale necropsy and the process by which a scientist has to go out and purchase pathogens from international suppliers. And one thing that I do not, that is very much out of scope, is any changes to their research methods. Those are documented, they're put together by career scientists, and they are very specific to their profession and practice. What we do from a process perspective is support those scientists uh, in their work, making it easier, more efficient, and more effective. And a lot of it has to do with the sharing of data, uh, extremely large sets of data, and utilizing high performance computing to do that. And as part of collaboration, what we're doing is we're putting together a view of how 4 different departments within the government: Environment Canada, Canadian Space Agency, Department of Fisheries, and our National Research Council. How can we work together efficiently and effectively to take advantage of all of the expertise? So our National Research Council does really cool stuff with AI. And Department of Fisheries wants to be able to utilize AI, or artificial intelligence, in order to uh, evaluate and analyze the audio and video uh, that is available to identify whales within a particular area. So a lot of AI work, which requires tons of data. So I might recommend that if you're interested at all, and I know business uses AI, uh, uh, so I would recommend very, very strongly to look into AI and get familiar with the needs and requirements of AI. It needs a lot of data, and it takes time and effort. But the business analyst is very much an important part of that, because we're helping to determine what needs to be evaluated, but also ensuring that they have the equipment and the resources that they need in order to do that work. So the nice thing about data analytics, including the AI space, is that it gives you the language you need to efficiently communicate with your scientists, right? Um, and I think this is very exciting. I love the idea of the data analytics certification. I just think it's great, and it is so because of the availability of it and the ability to get so much data using so many different resources through science. They use drones, video and audio from drones that fly over a whale, a beached whale, they or in the ocean to see to evaluate a particular area within the ocean. They work with the Coast Guard. They're right on the boats out there gathering data, um, gathering samples, working really, really hard so that they can bring all that back to their laboratories to do the research that they need, and to be able to utilize equipment that can actually communicate. So within the laboratory, you can have a digital laboratory in which another scientist from, say, across the country can come in and look at what you see within your microscope or whatever it might be, and they can efficiently collaborate in real time, kind of like teams, in order to discuss and provide, feedback to one another. And really, this is all about evidence-based decisions. So the data has to be clean. There's a lot of focus on the data and and how how it meets the protocols that they've provided to their partners, their collaboration partners in the. I'm a little early, I'm afraid. Perhaps, Moira, do you want to take some questions or?
Oh no, it's a good time to start with kind of a summary about where you think that this really goes for the public sector as well as other opportunities within science. I feel like you have some points that you could really flesh out within the summary.
Sure, thanks. So really, business analysts in science are really helping to efficiently manage data and information, and that can come through obviously through a number of areas, not the least of which is what processes need to be in play in order for the data to be received and managed effectively and efficiently. And we've got some great guys down in the East Coast that have really provided a wonderful catalog of data that's available for scientists to look up and um, utilize other pieces of data from other science research projects. The implementation of their off-the-shelf software supports science not only in their ISO certification, but also will help them to manage their resources efficiently and effectively. Not the least of which, of course, is the sample management, but also inventory management of their equipment. They have boats and microscopes and the use of the mobile laboratory and drones. We actually have a specialist, a drone specialist. I would love that job because they're going out into incredibly amazing vistas and doing some really important work that wouldn't otherwise be possible without the use of the drone to take video footage of a particular area. One of my colleagues out in the West Coast there was something called the Big Bend rock slide that's keeping our salmon from migrating up a particular river. and it's very, very remote. So they were using a lot of drones to assess this situation. And he's been working with them to be able to provide the right communications in that remote area so that they can share information, data, and get the right equipment in there to solve the issue, which, believe it or not, many different possible solutions, including something called a fish cannon to get the fish over this huge rock slide. So uh, they're looking at, as a business analyst, they're looking at uh, the helping to get the solution put into play by documenting, well, what are the requirements needed in order to move a fish from A to B without, and that acceptance criteria that you would have, without killing the fish, ensuring that uh, it can move a certain number of fish over a certain period of time. So requirements, although they're talking about maybe something that's a little unusual for us BAs that have a background in private industry, it allows for you to have, I don't know, a really robust kind of rich view of the world. As BAs, we're often looking behind the curtain in different organizations, or we're introduced to something that we may not necessarily have ever been introduced to before. Um, Knowledge management is another piece that I'm particularly interested in for this project. Although it's probably not necessarily at the bottom of the list, there's a lot of work that needs to be done in order to share data securely, because some of the data needs to be shared securely. But not all of it does, because most of the data that they're sharing will be public and available on our Canadian government website. But I think there's some knowledge management in a sort of more organized fashion that could be utilized by the partners. So, for instance, the protocols that are utilized for one group might be able to be utilized to some degree for another. It may help our sample partners, those going out into the field and working with the scientists, to have a resource for them. And again, this could also work very well for our Indigenous communities, where they can share their knowledge, hence allow us to be provide a better context for the science work that's being done. And data visualization tools are very important. We have a standard that's Microsoft BI. They're utilizing R and Python programming. But I think that as we start to work together with other departments, we'll also be introduced to other tools that can be quite helpful. I started to look around to see what other opportunities could be available for a business analyst out there, because I never really looked specifically to work in a science environment. I kind of fell into it, luckily. And one of the one advertisement I saw basically, described business analysis. What they want to do is, it's a commercial laboratory, but what they want to do is they want to put in an ERP, enterprise resource production, I believe, ERP solution, but also some other off-the-shelf solutions that will help their science business, if you will. And so I thought, well, see, BAs can work in anything, any sector. A business analyst is of value. Within healthcare, I know in Canada, our public healthcare, just as someone who utilizes the healthcare, our healthcare, I've noticed that they use the use of a fax a lot. And I discovered from my nurse practitioner that comes to visit my dad here that the reason why they do that is for information security, because the information that they don't want to use email because the information that's being shared is very private. And so, because I would shake my head and say, why are they using a fax? I had to drive miles to find one so that I could send it in. And there's often a lot of really good reasons for the use of certain technology, and how can BAs help to help an organization to realize uh, a more efficient, protected solution. I don't have that answer, but I think, just as an example of where we can be of value within healthcare. Agriculture is another one. There's a lot of science in agriculture and veterinary science. Uh, I Quite a few years ago, I went to uh, teach a class in business analysis or writing requirements, and it was specifically for veterinary sciences. And it was again, a data management solution. So that was really, really interesting as well. And needless to say, climate change is something that is on a lot of people's minds. And in Canada here, we provide funding for innovation around climate change. And I did work for an organization helping them to put in basically a case management tool that would help with grants and contributions and project management for climate change innovation initiatives. A lot of engineering in that, not necessarily science, but definitely there is science, but a lot of engineering, and a lot of solutions are coming out of the data realm again. So one example on climate change is a really interesting group came forward to present an innovation solution, and it was about gathering data from wind turbines out in the ocean and taking that data, taking the data about the ocean itself and the winds, and putting together an AI solution that helps to make the use of the wind turbines more efficient by basically a wind turbine. You can change its direction to optimize its energy generation. And so they had an AI solution that basically took all this data in and said, move the turbine X degrees in order to make it the most efficient. So I think there's a lot of areas in which, and not only are they interesting, but they're also, uh, uh, new and innovative opportunities for us as BAs.
Thanks, Maureen, for talking a little bit about the summary for the presentation here. So what I'm going to do now is launch a final poll after she's given about these ideas around opportunities for BAs in a science field, just to see kind of what everybody else is thinking. Where do you kind of see your opportunities? I'm not asking you to like own up to anything or be committed to anything at this point. Just give your thoughts and see where you're at with this. I know we talked a lot about data management sharing and how you can implement software solutions, but I'll just let this poll go for a few more seconds. And then Maureen, if you can talk to the results a little bit, that would be great.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Well, there's definitely one that's the least popular right now. I'll just give it a few more seconds and close. So the results are 23% for data management or sharing, 29% for implement software solutions to meet international standards, 5% are unpopular one for developing inventory management to meet international standards, 21% for knowledge management, and 23% towards data visualization. I know the poll kind of takes out more of the jargon around it, but I really would like, Maureen, if you could speak to the results and see what your thoughts are, where you think the opportunities are in business analysis.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think data analysis, uh, the whole data analysis piece is critical. Even if you're not analyzing the data yourself, you're understanding the challenges that they have and how data needs to be managed and migrated and utilized and stored and available, which ties really, really nicely with the visualization, right? That's the most important, well, not the most important, but it's an incredibly important piece of data analytics is looking at it from different perspectives and looking at the data uh, in as a community, not only as a communication tool, but also as a way to analyze the data that is provided to the scientists. Now, scientists tend to know exactly what they need. You know, they know I want this piece of software, or I want, I need to be able to do this. And they're not looking to me necessarily to tell them what product they need, but often what we're trying to help them to do is to utilize what we already have, or to make better use of what we already have, because they may be unaware of it. Um, so I think data visualization and data management, or the whole uh, data piece is really important. So that those are good choices. I don't blame you on the inventory management. It can be sample management, and inventory management can be a little dry. Uh, Even if you're talking about, um, salmon gills being stored for the next 200 years, but and managed. Um, COTS off the shelf. What I think is really interesting, one of my IT guys, he gets to go out on ship for about 28 days, and so he's there to ensure that things are running, and he can troubleshoot issues on ship. And one of as we were talking about solutions and what would help them, so basically what they'll do is they'll pull up fish from the ocean, and they'll sort through them, and uh, they'll measure them with an electronic ruler that transmits that data into a solution, some kind of software solution, and uh, sometimes it's Excel or Access. Either way, one of the scientists says, if I could do a hands-free voice to text, that while I'm looking at the fish, I could also provide metadata on that fish. It's female, it weighs so many pounds, it does this, it does it, it's got a green color to it, which is unusual for this species, blah, blah, blah. Which brought us down a wonderful discussion uh, about, well, what are the challenges, therefore, with this kind of technology? And so, if we pair the data side of it with really cool, possibly bleeding edge technology, voice to text has a lot of challenges in the science field because they're out on a boat, and it's noisy, and it's wet, and they're utilizing uh, scientific language which may not translate easily from voice to text. And so we had an opportunity to look at something called a Hella. It's out of Microsoft, and it's basically a headset that can go on to uh, that someone wears, and they can actually pull up a virtual computer and work on the virtual computer. Now, it takes a while to get these pilots through, but there's an awful lot of piloting work to ensure that what they're choosing as a solution for a problem, like, I wish I could gather more data while I'm out on a boat, rather than having someone behind me writing stuff, and then taking that wet piece of paper back to the lab 3 weeks later and putting it into a system. Um, these are some of the things that I think well into what we might refer to as off-the-shelf solutions. So I see that a lot of people chose that option as well.
Thanks,
Any other
Maureen. I think,
questions?
yeah, so I think this it does actually open us up to a good opportunity for Q&A. So anybody who has a question, feel free to post it in the questions box at this point. So what I would like to speak to is from Anita. In your role, were you analyzing the data for scientists or were you creating the requirements to gather data? Even if you just have examples maybe of how a BA would fit in that sphere, I think that's what Anita's interested in.
Absolutely. So no, I was not analyzing the data. Um, I wish I was smart enough to do that. But what we were doing was we were interested in providing the environment by which they could more efficiently get the data in and share the data out. So for instance, once their research is done, there's some challenges posting it to the federal government website. Is there a way that we can make that easier for them? So our role is not to touch their research and the output of that research, or the input for that matter. What we're trying to do is create an environment through processes, tools, and technology, and specific environments. So wireless is a big one for them. Their laboratories are, a bit aging, and that's why the federal government's investing in putting in new laboratories. And so, having some wireless technology in there, some voice to text in the lab will just make their life easier, because if you can picture somebody literally up to their elbows with big rubber gloves in fish guts, we call the solution the fish gut solution, because they don't have time to do research on all of the possible solutions around their process. What they do research on is to find other scientists and other tools through their collaboration partners that we could maybe bring into the environment and see if it fits into the environment.
Thanks, Maureen.
So I
I'll
like that
move.
question.
No, it's really cool to see how those pieces fit together. I have a question from May. What are your key lessons learned as a BA assigned to projects on a very specialized field like science?
Um, I think one lesson learned was, at first I was really nervous. Was that, you know what, my BA skills are appropriate for this. My other lesson learned was, and I always need to, is um, to ensure that y- you you come in knowing some of their language and understanding the stakeholder themselves. Um, I probably didn't spend enough time understanding the stakeholder themselves. Um, I had obviously some input from my colleagues about how different they are, but what I think I found out was they're really not that different than other stakeholders. They just want to get their job done. Where they're maybe different is again, I'm not sure how passionate a loan officer at a bank is about their work, but I sure know that scientists are incredibly passionate about what they do and really dedicated to their research, and they really don't want to be bugged with a lot of other stuff.
So does that
Stuff
kind of rub off
being,
on you,
no, I
that
think what I
passion?
understand is, yeah, oh, yeah, absolutely. No, that's a really good, yeah, it absolutely does. And how interesting their work is. One of the things I'm tasked with was just doing a bit of investigation into broadband at sea. So to help provide scientists with perhaps some solutions where they can share data a little bit easier. And that was, because one of my colleagues said, "Well, what do cruise ships do?" how do they get bandwidth out there? Good bandwidth, and it certainly costs money, but there's, when you start to roll up your sleeves where a scientist doesn't have the time to do that, look for those kinds of solutions. This is where a BA can come in and really help them to get something that fits into their research budget, but hopefully could provide them with a solution. Um, and this is a big organization, so I was lucky enough to find an IT resource out of the Coast Guard that's working on the same thing. So we kind of we're putting them together to look at solutions. So I learned a lesson about the scientists are very, very passionate about what they do and don't want to get caught up in a lot of the other stuff around them. So I have to deliver, like any other stakeholder, something that is of interest to them that will help them, period.
Thanks, Maureen. I think I have a question from uh, Basha. Where would you suggest I go to learn more about working in a more science-driven industry?
Oh, yeah, there's a good question. Um, I think what I found interesting when I sort of did a quick search in Indeed and some of the other job sites, there was as I was saying earlier, a laboratory, and a lot of the tasks and activities that they needed from the BA was very, very similar to what you might find in any advertisement from job advertisement from any particular group. But what you might want to do is just, look up things like some of the vendors out there that provide solutions to science. There's quite a few regarding what I'm putting in air quotes, the digital lab. If you do Google searches on digital lab, on laboratory management information systems, uh, and other, it depends on the science you're interested in too. But I think if you do some searches around that, you'll get a sense of how some of the what I call COTS vendors might have some openings for business analysts as well to help the industry or scientists move from one solution to another, or from no solution to a new solution. And I sometimes think that the scientists don't quite get the value of business analysis in that area, um, in that we're looking at the much bigger picture than simply that one slice of information or functionality that the scientist needs. So I would do
Well, you
that.
mentioned business data analytics as a certification that might be a good piece to get started as well. Are there any
Oh,
books that you'd
yeah.
recommend?
Business data analytics. Well,
Oh,
needless to
not
say, the
the question's
IIBA.
not specifically around business data analytics, but just science in general. Is there something that you'd recommend?
Books, there is something called research decisioning that I have, that helps to provide, a good, it can be a bit technical for me as a non-scientist, but I found it really helpful to sort of understand the point of view of research and the utilization of data for research. It's called research decisioning. I
Good
bet you it's in the
suggestion.
IIBA. Yeah, I bet you it's in the IIBA library too.
Well, I have a question to kind of flip to a completely different topic from Emily. Do you have examples of cultural or organizational change management challenges that are specific to the science domain that a BA needs to consider?
Oh, wow, that's a great question. Well, let's just say that as I was saying earlier, scientists are very passionate and focused on their research, and so they do whatever. They're like MacGyvers. I don't know if you know the term MacGyver, where if you have to get something done, you'll grab some some twine and a piece of gum and you'll make it work. And that's kind of how they are. And so once they get into a groove around their research process and they're in the middle of it, they're and if you're moving into change, they're not. My understanding is they're not as receptive to making change um, while they're in the middle of the work that they're doing. I don't want to change anything because I have everything I need just the way it is. So until that research is done, I'm not changing. Unlike perhaps in a more commercial environment, even though you might be in the middle of something, you're still going to change to that new solution. And so I think it's not that they need hand holding. I think they need, I think the planning for change needs to think about the scientists and their research. And if you're measuring your success based on, how quickly or how many people have adopted the new whatever it is, uh, you don't want to set yourself up for failure because it can often take them a little bit longer. So one of the things, might be the change that the federal government brought in was we're our data is open, it's available to whoever needs it. We're not, so we need to put it onto a federal government website, and they're like, oh God. And so that's where, you know, uh, you need to focus on how can we remove some of those tasks from them in order to ensure that this new solution is adopted. And then obviously work with their science managers to help them to meet those objectives. Like any change management. Um, but once they're into the research piece or they're into their analysis, it's really hard to get them to change anything.
I think that gives us some good insight about the unique stakeholders that you experience in a science environment where there is a lot of passion versus some of those times where
Hmm.
you have that more neutral approach. So I'll take this for the last question. I'm sorry that we won't be able to get to everybody today. I'll combine two though, because I think they really speak well together from Anita and Namita. Just a coincidence that they rhyme. So can we switch industries in a BA career? Like, say that we are in an IT industry and we want to move over. And then to Anita's question, how would we search for those types of jobs and look into pivoting into that kind of role?
That's a really good question, and I believe that IT is central to everything that we do. I don't, maybe central isn't the right word, but it's very much a piece of our toolkit. Knowing and working within utilizing IT as an enabler, for lack of a better word. And I worked with someone many years ago who said, what we do as BAs is try to help an organization reach their goals. And we do that through um, practices that are proven. And those practices are, understanding your stakeholders, understanding the context under which they're working, and utilizing the subject matter expertise that we have in order to address those needs. I always believe that it comes down to language, understanding their goals and objectives. So it's, often, especially with the federal government, they'll say, we want somebody with X experience, experience in HR for the last 5 years. And that can be hard to overcome. But I think you can also state and provide some relative information around that, in that you could say, uh, human resources requires the use of data and information and uh, use of software, as well as regulatory and policy guidelines in order to achieve their goals. I have that experience through the following, and explain what you've done in the past in order to do that, because really that's all that's what be you a scientist or I don't know, a rocket scientist or somebody else. They're trying to meet their goals, and that's what we're doing. I'm trying to help these guys meet their federal government mandate, which is to protect our oceans and make sure that our fish and wildlife are available in the marketplace and are safe. And so and that the BA practices can be put anywhere, and that's just my view. I hope that helped. I'm not
No,
sure.
that sums it up really well, I think, to how someone can kind of pivot from maybe that more linear approach to it to finding a new way to look at business analysis and applying it into a more
Mm-hmm.
scientific context. So I'll just have you flip to the last slide, Maureen, because we are out of time at this
Mm-hmm.
point. So I hope everybody enjoyed hearing at least most of our question answers. I know that we didn't get to everybody, but I would like to take a minute just to call out our upcoming Building Business Capability Conference coming this October. As a premier virtual experience, it's a great opportunity to network, learn, and do something new about business analysis, like how to, say, pivot into a science career, and learning all those upcoming trends from all around the world. With recordings to accommodate your time and schedule, multiple tracks on your interests, and many new events to attend with a new virtual setting, like BA Beyond. Just take a look at iiba.org/bbc. So that's all the time we have for our webinar today. I just want to take a second to say thank you so much, Maureen, for your time and insight. This has given us a really interesting look at how you can apply BA policies and approaches in a very different way.
I appreciate the opportunity, and thanks for listening to me. I really appreciate it, and thanks for all the hard work you guys do.
Thank you so much. Thanks again,
Bye
and for
now.
joining us today. Bye-bye.